So that's it. So basically, there is no difference between your state in which this rearrangement of atoms, and when you die, it's rearrangement of atoms.
Yeah.
That's it.
Yeah.
So there's no meaning to anything.
Well, sorry, and let me revise slightly. That's, as far as I know, that is what happens. I have no evidence to believe otherwise.
Yeah.
But maybe I'll be surprised.
So why are we programmed to die?
But I'll only,
Yeah.
but I could only know that, you know, after I'm dead and I wake up in some afterlife.
Why are we programmed to death? Why is it programmed in every living body?
What do you mean by programmed to death?
Okay. Which living species that you know lives forever?
Sorry, do you understand the concept of entropy?
No, I'm talking about living species.
Right, yes.
Living species. It's okay. Living species like ourselves.
Yes.
Trees, animals, plants and animals and so on. We're talking about they do not remain forever and forever in that state. For example, you are in a particular state, as you said, state of entropy, but you can't maintain it, even though you try to balance between anabolism and catabolism.
Yes.
Yeah. Your body is somehow programmed within your genetic codes in which you will die. That is inevitable in every living species.
I'm not sure if it's programmed in the sense that you're talking about.
So is it random?
We're
It's either programmed or random.
The sort of the makeup of our physiological body as we're born is sort of programmed in a sense, yes, by our genetics, and then as far as we know, as a function of existing in the natural world, our bodies grow and mature, and then due to
Why do we age and why do we die after
well,
that?
there's all kinds of research into like telomeres and kind of that's part of the chromosomal part of chromosomes.
Is it a random process when people age? Like human beings. Take the example of human beings.
There's growing.
Why?
I'm not an expert on telomeres, but there's growing kind of research and evidence about this. And yes, I'm aware there's scientists kind of trying to understand. Oh, maybe we can slow down, maybe reverse the aging process.
You're answering the question to yourself. When you say we can slow a nice, good, enjoyable experience, and you appreciate the opposite. So you don't want to suffer longer. You want your pain to be minimal, but you want your joy to last longer. People, when they want friendship and companionship, they don't say, I want just to be my friend today only. They want to say, I want you to be my friend forever and forever.
Of course.
Correct?
But you believe there's an afterlife due to Islam, right?
It comes. This is all logically corollary extension to this belief system. If you have within your makeup a feeling to live forever, I want to love forever and forever. Think about two lovers, okay? Say husband and a wife. They say, I love you forever and forever. I want to love you forever and forever. They have within them a concept, a feeling, an understanding, an experience. They want to last this with no end. God, the creator that we believe in, has inputted us, embedded us with this feeling in which this will be given to us in another life, because this is an experimental life in which you demonstrate to yourself whether you are worthy of living in a life of continuous joy, bliss, or you became an arrogant, stubborn individual. You reject knowing the truth and so on. So we believe our life that we have comes with consequences with the choice that we have.
But do you believe that your God is kind of all loving?
God, when you say all loving, it's something that needs to be explained. God is loving, and there's no one who can love more than God. So we say God is more loving than anyone else. Okay. God is more merciful than anyone else.
More loving than anyone else.
Yeah. Let me
That's good enough.
But
yes.
There are conditions attached to who can be the recipients of special love from God. There is two types of love from God. One is a general love for everyone, because that's his justice, being just. He gives this general love, and he shows them this guidance to his general love to every human beings. But he selectively gives a specific form of love those who are recipient of that by fulfilling certain conditions. So for example, we say God is Ar-Rahman, merciful. God is Ar-Rahim, merciful. But there's a distinction between these two mercy. One mercy encompasses everyone in a general sense. Another mercy is that extends only to the believers. Everlasting mercy, not just temporal mercy. To explain to you a bit more, it's interesting.
I understand.
Fine.
Do you think there are good people who don't believe in the same God that you do?
Yeah.
Believe in?
So it's a very good question you ask, because that really differentiates between do we need God to be good? Do we need religion to be good or not? The question is grounded in the very concept of what is to be good. We say good is what you are doing in line with what God asks you to do. Good by itself doesn't exist in ether, in nowhere, because good is not something, a conscious entity like you're saying, I'm good like that. It doesn't exist. It's a quality that is described by our Creator, which we need to be in line with that to be called good.
Does that not seem a little bit tautological to you?
How?
That God will give more love to the people he deems as good, but he deems people as good by his own metric. Essentially, what you're saying is God has constructed his own morality, and then kind of he not imposes it on us, but he differentiates between people by sort of how much they've conformed to his conception of morality.
So there's
but if I, as a human being, read the text of the Quran or any other religion, and there are things that I take issue with that I think are immoral, in fact, or perhaps amoral, or not necessarily, or not being consistent with what I think is moral as I understand it. Do you not see why I kind of have an issue with that? And would God accept such people into this afterlife?
So let me understand what you just said so far. The concept of good, and why you have an issue with God dispensing his certain attributes more in a quantitative way on some than the others. Let me give you an analogy, a scenario to understand that. Suppose all of us work for a company, and we have the company who's going to give us the wages, right? You do all the things the company asks you to do. Convene meetings, contract deals, and so on and so forth. But me, for example, I don't do that even though when I had the opportunity to do so. I deliberately, instead of working for the company, I try to help his company out and so on and so forth. In situations like this, even though I'm employed by the same company, would it be just for the company to equally look at our work and say, I will not punish you with anything, but I will give you the same bonus that you get because of what you've done, and I will have the same bonus as well. So the bonus, right? We're talking about the bonus issue.
Yes.
Forget the punishment issue, the bonus. So you get the bonus for all that you've done, and all that I didn't do and did something contrary, I get the bonus. Would you say this is fair?
First of all, rewards and punishment are just the inverse of each other, right? So if God motivates people to do good because they'll be divinely rewarded, or because they don't want to be divinely punished, I kind of see those as the same thing. If you're separating people into two groups, you can either say like reward, not reward, or punishment, not punishment. I don't really see.
But I talked about bonuses between two, not punishment,
right.
bonuses.
So exactly that, but this is why I'm making this point, because bonuses are a type of reward, not a type of punishment.
Yeah, both are the reward.
Sure.
So if both are rewarded equally.
It's interesting you're making this analogy and kind of putting the executives of the company in the.
I want you to understand something from real life.
In the position of
Feel
God.
free to jump in whenever you want.
In the position of God. In your analogy, that's kind of what you're doing.
Could I just ask a simpler question? What is good according to you?
I don't have an objective description of what is good. It's something I think about all the time. there are many situations I encounter in my own life, or in fiction, or in other people's lives, where I don't have an immediate answer to the question of what is good in this situation, or what is the right thing, or what is the right thing for this person to do. I don't always necessarily have an immediate answer. And when I encounter such situations, it'll most likely cause me to go away and think about what is good in that kind of situation, and hopefully that will evolve my moral thinking. But the important thing there is that it's all thinking happening inside my head, in conversation with other people as well, to kind of see what they think. Maybe someone can help me. I don't want to outsource it, just someone or something outside of my experience, because I don't see how that is necessary.
And you use the word moral. So, in terms of your perspective, would you say that morality is something which is real, or morality is something which is real but inaccessible, like a moral skeptic would say? What would be your perspective of morality?
I think morality is socially constructed.
Socially constructed.
Yes.
So, give me a sort of example of something that we have morally constructed, which you subscribe to as being morally good.
Injunctions against rape and murder and theft and slavery would be some examples.
Okay.
Yeah.
So currently, the injunction against murder.
Yes.
Okay? That is something generally people agree about. But say in the what biologists call the environment evolutionary adaptation, hunter-gatherer societies, that wasn't there. So the social construct of the injunction of killing someone innocent was not there. That you're forbidden to do that. At that point in history, would you say it was morally permissible to kill somebody, or would you say that there is a morality which is...
This is a rather sort of like a progressivist or kind of Hegelian, if you're familiar with Hegel, sort of way of looking at history, the idea that kind of human civilization is kind of always progressing in terms of its morality, its ethics, its technology, its culture, all these kind of things. If you assume that human civilization as a whole, opposites disparate, as a whole is kind of monotonically advancing, then we can kind of look back on hunter-gatherer societies with our modern ethical standards, and we can say that that's wrong. But yes, obviously from the perspective of hunter-gatherers at the time, they were tribal by definition. Yes, and if people came and attacked their tribe, they did things to not only defend themselves and the people of their tribe, but to assert dominance over the other tribe. Now, obviously, I and hopefully everyone has all kinds of ethical issues with that today. But on the other hand, without that kind of virility, that sort of like desire to be assertive to live, maybe we wouldn't be here. So I don't know. In terms of more recent examples from history, where we have a lot more specific accounts of specific people and specific events, I think it's much easier to give a judgment on such things. But yes, of course, part of my idea of morality being socially constructed is that it changes over time.
So would you subscribe to say the view of the moral zeitgeist, which people like Richard Dawkins speak about? Because you sort of alluded to that there is some direction that we are headed towards. Would you say that that is historically and sociologically what we see in the history of humanity?
Maybe we should.
So if we take something like the Greeks, right? The Greeks were more egalitarian than, you see, we have a counterexample, right?
Now, the important thing in that progressive view is I said that the advance of human civilization is monotonic. I do not necessarily agree that the progressivist history is correct. I don't think it is always monotonic. I mean, just think about, the fall of the Roman Empire, the burning of the Library of Alexandria, and all the kind of knowledge that was lost then, and then we had the Dark Ages in Europe, and yes, for centuries, the Islamic nations.
Why don't you stand there, because we can barely hear anything.
Oh, sorry.
Stand in the middle, yeah.
In the Middle East and Northern Africa,
They can't hear, that's what I'm trying to
flourished.
Sure.
They were from kind of, I don't know, 600 to 1200 AD. Yeah, the Islamic world was kind of, along with China, was the world leader in terms of like mathematics and engineering and all, culture, all these things. Yes. So it's not monotonic.
Yeah. Okay. So we can agree there are some anomalies in that theory.
Yes.
Would you subscribe to the moral zeitgeist though as a idea? Would you say that this is something you believe in?
Well, it depends. Depends whose morals you're talking about, what agenda, political and economic agendas are at play. It's there are 8 billion people on this planet. It connects to the alignment problem. Like, yes, there might be this group of people over here that's trying to move the moral zeitgeist in this direction, but then there might be another group of people over here that's going in a different direction.
Yeah. Let's assume that the UN is our sort of representative as humanity. Let's just assume that for the sake. I know that's a very contentious issue.
There's issues with
Okay,
that,
so let's just say just war theory.
Right.
Okay. So the ideas there, some of the ideas from the Geneva Convention as well, some of the ideas from international relations perspective in terms of treaties. Some of these ideas are now pretty much universally accepted, right? Would you say that objectively humanity has gone to a better place?
I think if you want to talk about the UN specifically, that's an interesting question. I mean, it's one thing to talk about your laws and your beliefs. It's another thing to talk about actions or inactions for that matter.
Okay, so let me just clarify. I don't mean to say something prescriptive. I mean something descriptive. This is what's written by
In the charters, for example.
the charters, exactly. It's not about whether the UN has the authority to prescribe those things and whether the UN is effective. What I'm trying to get to, just to give you the upshot of what I'm saying, if you do subscribe to any element of your morality being objective, as in we're better today than we were in the past, I believe the only way you could do that is through a theological argument, is not if somebody does not believe in God or something supernatural, they won't be able to do it. I'm just giving you the upshot of my argument,
Right, sure.
so you know where I'm going to be headed.
Sure.
Yeah.
Now, again, I'm not arguing the progressive viewpoint. I think morality goes up and down and sideways in different directions. However, I can be more specific. I can name specific examples, such as treatment of people who are not heterosexual, treatment of people of different races, all these kind of obvious examples. I can think about kind of fairly recent history where those people were kind of treated poorly officially by judicial systems, even in Western countries, and kind of unofficially by the populations as a whole. And the civil rights movement in America, Martin Luther King, that to me is an example of moral improvement of a kind.
I'm trying to understand
doesn't mean that there aren't still issues around race in America. Obviously there are.
I'm trying to understand your perspective a little bit better, because you seem to be saying two different things. You seem to be saying there's no objective morality. I could be wrong. I'm just trying to understand. You seem to be saying there's no objective morality, it's a social construct, but at the same time, you do believe there's been progress. Now, progress is predicated on the idea that there's some standard benchmark objectivity. So there's two. I'm trying to understand your perspective better.
No.
Okay, sure.
So what I'm saying is I can identify specific cases where the way we treat this kind of person or this situation now is, in my view, more ethical, more kind, more humane
Objective?
than how we used to. No, it's not. I can't say it's objective. It's just my opinion.
Can I put out a contention I have?
I can't prove it objectively.
Sure.
because
Can I
it's
put out
social construct.
a contention to that? I believe the idea of progress is incompatible with subjectivity, and progress can only be compatible with objective moral standards.
Say more.
Shall I repeat that?
Say more.
Sorry?
And can you elaborate more?
Okay.
Why you?
I believe if somebody believes in moral subjectivity, or they believe in, say, moral skepticism, that they believe there is objective morals out there but we can't access them, from both those perspectives, they can't subscribe to a progressive perspective or moral zeitgeist. You have to have a belief that morals exist, which are objective, and secondly, that they are accessible. When you have both these beliefs, then you can subscribe to something in regards to progress or the moral zeitgeist.
No, you're not listening to my argument. It's observational. The way I think about ethics is I look at things happening in the world, I identify cases or sources of suffering, and then I think, how could we reduce or prevent or alleviate the suffering?
Sure. Is suffering bad?
And when such alleviation happens, then I say this is an improvement. Yes, the core, it's a rule of thumb. It's not a perfect logical process, but yes, a core principle of how I think ethically and morally about the world is suffering is bad. Let's try and reduce suffering.
So I think if I may just to quickly understand what you're saying.
I don't think that's
so
really
your position is suffering is bad. We want to eliminate, prevent, minimize, totally get rid of it if we can. That determines what progress is. So that's how we're working on. To you, morality is grounded on this concept, in your understanding, where people should not suffer. And we need to reduce the suffering. When we can reduce the suffering, then we have made progress. So that is to you not only subjective, it's actually an objective standard which everyone should follow, because you are not making your individual like I wish there would be no suffering. You expect and you desire that everyone accept this foundational understanding that suffering should be avoided.
No, that's why
I never, with respect, I never said that.
Okay.
I maintain, I'll repeat it again if you want me to say it again. This is how I personally think about ethics and morality. Many other people may also think about ethics and morality that way. I have not forced any of those people to think about the world in the same way I do. They merely have come to the same conclusion as me.
Sure. So the perspective that he elucidated right now, that is what I believe you were subscribed to. You seem to be saying two different things. You seem to be saying this is my perspective, as in it's subjective, but at the same time, you're being pretty categorical that reducing suffering is a good thing.
Well, yes, but of course,
do you see they're incompatible, these two ideas?
It's my personal opinion that reducing suffering is a good thing, and yes, I'm being subjective. The way those things interact is the question of how we identify suffering, and that is also subjective, because there are many cases where we can think of where different people say one thing is suffering, this isn't suffering, or this kind of, or in a slightly different way, this kind of suffering is allowable, this one isn't.
I don't agree with that. I don't agree with that because I believe you're muddying the waters a little bit. There is some type of suffering which is hard to, it's hard to categorically say it's bad, because say suffering when you're getting a tooth removed, you're getting that kind of stuff. We're not talking about that. There's other type of suffering, like for example, taking prisoners of war and torturing them, right?
Yeah.
So that type of suffering is something we can categorically say is wrong. So that type of suffering, you would say
yes, except it doesn't appear to be wrong to the people taking those prisoners of war, does it?
No, but clearly, we don't really clearly we don't really care what their subjective view is. We objectively want to impose the fact that this is wrong.
No, we subjectively want to impose.
That's my belief.
Subjectively.
Is that my belief is that there is an objectivity, which is why it's prescriptive for us to try and stop that action.
I don't think we need to refer to objectivity to come to that conclusion.
So why would people want to share your views that removal of suffering is a good thing? Why would people agree and accept what you think is only subjective? Why would, for example, people out there...
Again, you're misunderstanding what I'm saying. I'm not asking anyone to agree with any individual ethical statements I make. The only thing I want people to do is to be able to think about ethics and suffering and morality.
Can I give you an example?
Wait, let me finish my point. In an independent way, not influenced unduly by any external sources. You might, read fiction or non-fiction. You might take in all kinds of sources. You might talk to other people about ethics and suffering, and those opinions you hear might influence your worldview. But ultimately, you need to form your own worldview and then keep developing that throughout.
But how would you know something is better than what you already have? How would you know something is better than what you already developed?
I can't know that, but I can think about it and just make a decision as to whether I think it's better.
Can I give you an example?
That's the difference.
I think this example will help. Say, let's
10 more minutes or something, yeah?
Maybe, inshallah.
Or longer?
Let's look at
Let's
the Bosnian
wrap it up in a
genocide,
few minutes,
right?
Okay.
What's happening in Bosnia in the 90s.
Yeah.
Do you think there was a moral duty for nations to intervene in the way that they did to stop the genocide?
First of all, I just want to say I wasn't alive when that was happening.
If you were there, hypothetically.
I'm not perfectly up to speed on all the historical details, but I do. Generally,
okay,
yes.
so first,
I generally know there was genocide in Bosnia.
Sure.
I know some aspects of it. Yes.
I want to give you my theory.
If you want to talk about, in terms of interventionism, this is a very interesting topic ethically. It's something I think about a lot. It's something I struggle with. I think, for example, that the American campaign in Vietnam in the 60s was terrible, morally abhorrent war crime.
And if you had power, would you intervene?
10 minutes?
Inshallah.
If say you were a
you have to call us in 10 minutes so that we can go.
Sorry?
Remind us, anyone,
Vietnam
10 minutes and then...
is obviously bad. But then if you think of more recent interventions, such as the one in Iraq to kind of oust Saddam Hussein, now obviously you can look at Iraq and the state of today and what's happened since then, and certainly the Western handling of Iraq post Saddam Hussein is far from perfect, and
I
know many people that died and suffered as a result of that intervention. So it wasn't perfect,
I think
but I think it's more arguable than Vietnam. So the point I'm making is intervention is a complex question, and I think I'm thinking about it on a case by case basis.
No, so I think what's happening is there's a lot of muddying of the waters happening again, because we're going into...
Excuse me, I'm not muddying the waters. I'm just trying to explain a complex position.
Okay, but that's what I'm saying.
I'm sorry, I apologise, I don't have a simple ready-made answer
so
for you.
if we leave aside Bosnia and Iraq, if we go to a hypothetical scenario where there is oppression happening, there's suffering happening, my theoretical framework, I'll just lay it out for you, is that I believe objective morality exists, it's accessible, and they are objective moral duties.
How is it accessible?
Okay, I'll explain all of this, right? So the existence of it is based upon the existence of God.
Right. On that point, I'm open.
Can I lay out the framework
Sure.
first?
Yes.
Okay? So the existence of morality is based upon the existence of God. Okay? The understanding of what that morality is, because remember, you can believe in objective morality, but you can't access it. Like a moral skeptic would say, we can't access it, then it's useless. You might as well not have a standard. So I believe the understanding of what is right and wrong comes from two sources. It comes from revelation, and it also comes from what in Islam is called the fitrah, our natural disposition. And the third is the moral duty of enjoining the good and forbidding the evil is an injunction that God gives. So all of this is based on theology.
Sure.
I believe if someone does not have theology, they can't justify intervention, and they can't justify saying we are making progress or suffering is bad and we should reduce it. I believe all those things are incoherent if you don't have this perspective.
Why is theology first of all, I would contend that theology is a way to access morality in the first place, but you seem to not...
Say that again?
I would contend theology is a way to kind of access morality, certainly objective morality in the first place, but you seem to not only be saying that, but also that it's the only way of doing that.
I would negate...
Why do you think that's the case?
Sure. So let me be clear with my claim. Not only am I saying, like you said, it's a way to access morality, I'm negating all types of
other methods, yes.
all types of moral
Exactly.
systems and ethical systems,
Sure.
if they're not theologically grounded.
That's exactly,
negating
yes.
them
Right,
totally,
right.
categorically.
So saying that, as an atheist, you're basically saying I can't be moral, right?
Okay,
is that what you're saying?
Let me rephrase that. I believe you as an atheist can never be a moral realist if you are an atheist.
Moral realist.
As in, you believe morals exist in reality, and they are moral values, and there's moral duties.
Oh right. Well, I never said they were.
No, I'm saying an atheist.
I said they were subjective.
No, that's fine. You as an atheist
Yes.
didn't say that. What I'm saying is, an atheist or someone who doesn't believe in God and an agnostic can never believe in objective values and objective duties.
Okay.
Yeah.
So what? What's the point?
No, I'm just elucidating on my worldview.
Fine, but it doesn't.
No, what follows from there is the question of progress is actually meaningless because you can't.
Incoherent.
It's not that coherent. When you say progress, you already have a standard that you are using this to say I'm passing that, and that's why progress is, or degress if you want to call that if you're not doing that.
I referred to the very vague and sometimes flimsy standard of evaluating suffering in people and animals as well. If you that's a separate thing.
But people can have a difference of opinion what it means to is suffering good or
Of
bad,
course,
and those
I said that. Yes,
I know that's
of
what I'm saying,
course.
and that's why I'm saying you can't say that this is progress. They will tell you no, this is not progress because we don't accept this kind of framework. So if you want to accept,
it's my opinion.
I know. That's what you've been telling throughout.
I can't elevate
Felix,
it any higher than that.
you said so. You said this is your personal subjective understanding and interpretation of the world of ethics and morality. But if you have a framework like what's theologically grounded, as the Subbor is saying, in which then you can see that this can be the anchor for every human being to say, yep, agree, because this seems to be the gold standard. Because remember, we have many standards people are bringing on the table. There is one standard that we can say that seems to be the better, in fact, if not the most gold standard. That is what theology does, giving that standard, but it has whole package.
I need to respond to that bit.
Sure.
Because so first of all, I would not agree with that. Second of all, that would depend on the three suppositions you gave: the existence of God,
Existence of objective morality,
the existence of objective morality, our
accessibility
ability to
to
access it, and
moral duties.
our moral obligations, our moral duties.
narratives. Yeah.
I mean, I would contend with all three of those
Okay,
suppositions.
let's just contend with one. Without objective morality, there are no duties, and there's no point accessing it. 'Cause
Right.
there's not, okay.
So if there's no God, then
There's no
there's
objective
nowhere
morality.
for you to get this objective
There
morality.
it simply doesn't exist. Okay, I'm going to make a stronger claim, not just these claims, which is any moral values that you have as an atheist. The fact that you want to take care of the poor, you want to help the elderly, you want to do these things, even if you don't believe in God, they are actually from God. So in Islam, all human beings have been, and I'll give you evidence for this, all human beings have been created with an inner fitra, with an inner disposition, natural disposition to be kind. Okay,
I know you.
and this goes in complete opposite direction to if the atheist fairy tale was true of how we came about.
Sorry, fairy tale.
As in
What's the fairy tale? you're referring to?
the fairy tale that we came into existence, without a designer, without a god, and
And your explanation of creation is not a fairy tale.
yes, I believe it's true.
Well, of course,
Okay.
of course, you believe that.
No, but can I just finish my argument?
Well, no. Sorry. I didn't describe a fairy tale at any point in my argument. I specifically.
No, I believe the atheism is a fairy
I
tale.
specifically maintain I cannot give a scientific or a rational or any kind of explanation for how the universe came into existence.
No, we're talking about morality. Atheist naturalism cannot explain the origin of morals and ethics, and your humane values cannot be explained under an atheistic perspective.
It can explain how they arose.
There's only three theories.
In terms of anthropology, right? We can look past. We can look at the beginnings of Homo sapiens or Neanderthals, hunter-gatherer societies, and then we can use anthropology to look at kind of early, like, nomadic and then agricultural societies, etc. And obviously the archaeological evidence for those kind of societies is very limited, but there are still things we can observe.
Look, I spent a lot of time studying the evolution of morality, right? I'll break it down into three different ways that they try and explain it. Reciprocal altruism, kin selection, and the expanding circle. These are the three main ways they explain, okay?
Yeah.
Each one of these can be refuted, okay? So the first point is reciprocal altruism. So at rock bottom, we are supposed to be selfish from a Darwinian perspective. But the reason why we are kind...
No. I see you misunderstood the meaning of the selfish gene.
They're involved now in the discussion.
Referring to the selfish gene, Richard Dawkins' book.
Yes.
So this is a common misconception. The title, the selfish gene, is not referring to the genes making the animals they create selfish. The whole idea is the gene, and even the proteins that preceded the gene, are selfish in the sense that they are literally self-replicating.
I know this. I've studied.
You know this, right?
Yeah.
But
and I never made that claim.
right, but okay, you seem to be saying that chemical mechanism that then builds up into animals like us makes us selfish.
You didn't actually.
I don't
hear me out.
agree with that argument.
So you've read the selfish gene.
Yes.
So in the selfish gene, what you find is Richard Dawkins is explaining kin selection and reciprocal altruism. Do you know why he's doing that?
Why do you think it's doing that?
He's trying to explain the origin of our humanity. So he for example, JBS Haldane, he gives the example of I would give up my life for 2 brothers or 4 cousins, right? So the idea is that your offspring share your genetic material, so taking care of them is taking care of yourself. So that's kin selection. Reciprocal altruism is when they're not your kin, when you scratch their back, they're going to scratch your back. It's for evolutionary, from a fitness perspective, on average, it's better for you. The expanding circle is, a simple way of explaining it is, say me and Mansur, we are 2 brothers and we are living with our wives next to each other. And what happens is, because he's my brother, and taking care of him is taking care of myself from a genetic perspective, as you know. And so natural selection looks for quick and dirty solutions, which is just be nice to people around you as opposed to just be nice to your kin. And now when Mansur moves away because the society is being urbanized and you move in, you're not my kin, I'll be nice to you, and that's an evolutionary byproduct. So from that you get an expanding circle.
Yeah.
Okay. These 3 ideas, and the expanding circle is not mentioned by Dawkins, it's been popularized by Pinker. These ideas are there to explain our humanity, because Darwinian evolution doesn't explain our altruism, so that's why these ideas have been put forth. And each one of these ideas, I believe, can be refuted quite easily.
I'd love to hear that.
Okay, let me
ahead.
give you a very easy refutation, because we were supposed to
They're
be
involved in
right?
another discussion.
Have you given charity anonymously?
Anonymously. Yes.
Okay, that's not kin selection, that's not reciprocal altruism, that's not the expanding circle.
Okay, it's something new. How does that refute any of the 3 things that you mentioned?
For each one of these theories, there has to be a target, right? there has to be an evolutionary
yes,
benefit.
but they're not describing the totality of how morality is.
Okay, so
right? There could be
which other theory would there be?
Well, giving charity anonymously is not even reciprocal altruism. It's just altruism, right?
Okay, good.
Without the reciprocal.
How does that have evolutionary advantage?
Okay, sorry.
Is that the question?
That's true altruism. True altruism, right?
It doesn't need to have an evolutionary advantage. It
No.
makes me.
But
well,
that's non-Darwinian, by the way.
This is why I don't care that it's not Darwinian.
But you were supposed to be defending how they can explain humanity, how they can explain these moral values.
I never claimed. I never was trying to defend that. You were the one that raised
Okay,
it.
so
and
so
asked
okay,
me,
so let
and
me
now,
let me
and
put
now
it in
you're
a-
asking me to defend it and argue.
I said I can challenge.
That's
I
quite
said-
interesting.
Okay, let me just recap.
Way of
I said I can challenge these, and you said
Changing
show
what
me
I
how.
said.
I said I can challenge these. You said I'd like to see that.
Yes, but you were the one that raised these.
Okay.
These
Do you know why I raised it? Because
Right.
other than theism, the only way that atheism can try and explain morality is the Darwinian mechanism, unless you know of another perspective.
I agree with that. We can. Again, this is what I think. I don't know how many times I have to say this. Like, I exist in the world. There were people that existed before me. I'm not the first person who has thought ethically. So I come across that, and I think, oh, how can I be a free ethical thinker myself? How can I continue this? And suffering is kind of one of the base things I've decided upon. Like, that's a good place to start from.
We've gone around in full circle, but remember we spoke about objectivity. The whole reason the discussion went this way is because we spoke about objectivity.
Yes.
Because remember I said objective morality exists, we can access it, and we have duties.
Right.
And this was my theological framework, and you thought this was wrong. So then we spoke about objectivity, right? And when it came to objectivity, we were trying to speak about human values, right? And then when it came to human values, obviously from a theological perspective, we believe in God, so we believe they come from God. But from the atheist perspective, how would they explain these things? You can't take values from thin air. They have to be based on something, right?
Yeah, and I've given you a basis for what the values are based on.
What are they based on?
Minimization of suffering.
Again, but minimization of suffering, you believe to be something good.
That's a choice. That's the assumption, the axiom I'm presenting.
So how do you justify that? How do you justify
It's an axiom. It doesn't need justification.
How can you call it an axiom?
You know what an axiom is, right?
Do you know what? I actually agree with you. An axiom doesn't need justification.
That's what an axiom is.
Okay, but you've taken an arbitrary statement and you said this is an axiom.
That's what an axiom. And axioms are arbitrary. and
Okay.
unjustified.
If I say that tent is actually purple and that's an axiom, can I do that?
How do you make something axiomatic?
An axiom is actually
that's a complete non sequitur.
It's not a non sequitur.
To say an axiom is arbitrary.
Now, how do you make something axiomatic?
To say that an axiom is arbitrary does not mean to say that no thought has been put into it. But the key point is the thought can't be. The thought has to be sort of intuitive.
Can I reword my question?
And there has to be a choice.
Can I reword my question? Minimizing suffering is good, that proposition.
Yes.
Is this self-evidently true?
Of course not.
Okay.
It's
okay, good.
Again.
That's what I'm trying to get to. So it's not
just,
axiomatic.
What do you mean? What do you mean?
It's not self-evidently true.
No, that's a misunderstanding of what an axiom is.
Okay.
Because I come from a mathematical background. In mathematics, we have all kinds of different branches of mathematics, and in order to do any mathematics, you need to have some axioms,
yeah, of course,
and some rules of deduction,
yes,
right? And then you can go and prove things, do all kinds of mathematics and stuff. Now, that is a formal language, a formal logical system. When we're talking about morality, that does not conform to formal logic.
Why not?
Because we're talking about things in the real world. It's not abstract. It's messy.
Then you can't call it axiomatic then.
It involves.
Proposition is different.
Well, it's an analogous.
Okay.
I didn't mean an axiom in a formal logic sense.
Okay.
I'm making an analogous link. I'm
So,
saying it's kind of an axiom in the same sense as it would be in formal logic.
Sure.
But I can't. But yes, I can't.
So look, if you're a mathematician,
You see
you're
the
a
difference.
pure philosopher. Mathematics is the purest philosophy you can get, right? So let's just agree on something. When it comes to deriving, say, Pythagoras' theorem, there's going to be axioms
Yes.
before you derive the theorem.
Yes.
Now, thank God I've never had to derive it from first principles. Maybe you did that at university. When you are going to be deriving Pythagoras' theorem, you're going to start off with some axioms. Now, those axioms, you simply can't insert Pythagoras' theorem as one of the axioms, can you?
Well, you could. In mathematics, you can do.
This is very strange for to
You
hear.
can do whatever you want. The whole point of mathematics is you can choose your axioms to be whatever they want.
Have you
Of
tried
course, what you try to do when you're choosing axioms is you choose the minimum possible set of.
That's my point.
Of the most basic.
And you start with what you know to be
statements.
true. You start with what you know
Well,
to be true.
but but again, I would contend that axioms. We don't know axioms to be true.
Can I just ask you-
No.
Sure.
I need something. We don't know axioms to be true. They're not self-evidently
Okay,
true.
okay, so-
we merely assert them.
So can I just ask
to
you a
be
quick
true.
question? And we need to go
Because-
after this.
Because
We'll talk
everything we've seen.
Yeah, just a quick question.
Yes.
A squared plus B cubed is C squared as an axiom.
Right.
Can I put that down as an
Plus
axiom?
BQ.
Yeah.
You can do whatever you like.
No,
Yeah.
you can't.
you can't.
Do that.
Why
You
not?
can't do that.
How can you?
Because that's not Pythagoras' theorem. I've just screwed it up.
But you just did. You just said it.
Okay, but
You can
is
can
that
say
valid?
you can say whatever you like.
No, wait.
What do you
What-
mean?
what's-
What do you mean? Is it valid?
Okay.
In what
Okay, so
in what context?
okay, complete the sentence. A squared plus B squared is C squared. If I did A squared plus C cubed, B cubed is C squared, would that be coherent?
You haven't told me what A, B, and C are. I need to know what mathematical system.
The whole point is
you're
it's
working
abstract.
with.
Something
Doesn't matter
that
what
is self-evident.
It could be
That's
one.
from
the
the
point.
involved definitions already. In the terms
You're not
You can come in here because I think that's
so
important.
do you understand what the problem is?
Yeah,
What
yeah.
I'm
You
pointing out?
cannot arbitrarily choose anything to make it
Anything.
axiomatic. Okay.
axioms.
Axioms. As you know, the gentleman here, the brother here, you share the same views in terms of physicists, mathematicians.
Right.
You deal with axioms. So when you have axioms, there are something that is self-evident.
from the definition.
That's how the definitions are, and then you say, based on this, we're going to use our variables, and the variables then will then give us certain answer, because axioms are something that you're known already. It's not unknown, is it?
But they're not.
So when you made
Yes, but
Felix, when you made a statement about suffering, minimizing suffering as a good, why did you make it self-evident? You said you didn't make it self-evident.
I never said it was self-evident.
Okay, then perhaps
I'm
maybe
saying,
okay,
I'm
fine.
saying
You know
I
what?
make a choice.
Okay, Felix.
A choice.
I get you. I think what you said. Okay, so I think it's just we're having issues with some certain semantics here. So you're not actually meaning axiomatic in this sense. To you, these are something that is experimentally, observably, that is shown to be the better things to actually hold on to it. Minimizing suffering is a good. It's coming from experience, personal or otherwise.
That's how axioms are chosen as well. In terms of
Not from experience.
You refer to Euclid. You know, the parallel postulate. Two parallel lines never meet. I mean, that's also. It also could be read as a definition
No, but there's a
of what parallel lines are.
but there's a problem
You
which
can
I
choose.
Okay.
You can choose different.
Before
you can
we say
choose
this, because we have to go soon, I
even
want
in
to
Euclidean
bring
geometry,
something.
You can
Felix,
choose different sets of axioms.
fine.
from the
I want
ones
to
that
bring
we
the
know.
issues. Remember, I talked about like how
They're malleable.
bonuses is given to two employees of an individual,
Yes.
and it seems fair not to give them equal bonuses. Now, in our belief system, God is fair and just and merciful, so it will be unfair to treat the guilty and the innocent the same way.
That's your,
Likewise,
that's your opinion.
I mean, you can say this is axiomatic. It's
Yes,
axiomatic
it is. That's the axiom you're choosing.
No, I'm saying this axiom that I'm choosing to treat the guilty and the innocent the same is unfair. Now, you can actually demonstrate that through experience, through understanding, through living mathematically, if you want, you say like, how can we equally reward the criminal and the victim of that criminal? Excuse me. You can demonstrate that actually this is not a good position to take, and then you would agree actually the better position would be the guilty should be accountable for their crime.
Yes.
The innocent shouldn't be punished for the crime they didn't commit.
In terms of the one life that I know we have, I'm a big yes. I think it's good thing to have prisons. I think it's good to have a justice system and for people to be convicted of crimes they've committed and people who haven't to be acquitted. And then I also think that for those people who are correctly convicted and sent to prison, that there needs to be some kind of rehabilitation system.
Absolutely, Islam has that precisely.
So they aren't just permanently, with rare exceptions, they aren't just permanently exiled from society.
Very good. So you
forever.
very good. So
That redemption is possible.
So Felix, you really have now an understanding of the Islamic systems of crime and punishment. Even though people are in hellfire, they would not last in hellfire for eternity unless they fall into just only a minute one or two categories. Okay, but the rest of them,
But
they can.
but I suppose I would contend that
Rehabilitation we're talking about. For example,
Well-
say a Muslim. I'm just giving an example.
Yes.
A Muslim who has committed so much crime, so much sin. A crime against God is a sin. So much crime, and because of that, through God's justice, they go to hellfire. They go to hellfire for this rehabilitation. They will be punished and cleansed. Okay, retribution done, and eventually they will come out and they will be in paradise.
there's no one who's in hellfire.
No, I'm
forever.
talking about this is the Muslim category of
I
Muslims.
understand, but
Yeah.
but
So the
Jesus-
Muslims, any Muslim who goes to hellfire, they will not remain in hellfire. They will come out eventually. It may be billions, zillions, quintillion years, but they will come
but
out.
not infinite.
They will never have eternally never-ending punishment. Muslims, because of the prerequisite of their salvation, which is to worship and acknowledge God is the only one worthy of worship alone, and they submitted to that concept, they will come out of the hellfire and they will be in paradise. And when they are put into paradise, into this place of bliss, and if God asked them, did you feel any suffering? Did you know anything painful? They will say never. Because one dip in paradise is enough for them to totally forego all the sufferings they had. So this is what we believe is, even though they are rehabilitated, this is their eventual reward because of their acknowledgement of the one created you. So because we have to wrap up, I want to just bring this to the attention where atheists often do not give too much of a priority to think critically on this issue. If you and I exist now, we are something, and you are not a total sophist, skeptic, ultra skeptic in which you deny your own existence. So you exist and I exist, we are something here.
Sure.
If this is the case, then by extension, there has to be something always in existence, in one shape or form.
No, I would not agree with that.
The other alternate proposition is, at one point there was absolutely nothing.
I don't know. I don't know. Again, I think
I'm giving you some logical possibilities.
Is there a third possibility?
Okay, let me give you.
I really think you need to be more humble.
Okay,
about
no.
the
Let me give you
claims- about the
possibilities.
claims
Let me give
you're
you.
making.
Let me give you some
No,
possibilities.
It's not about you misunderstand. It's not about. Oh, let's go through all the possibilities, whatever. These are not questions we can answer at the moment.
We can.
It's no good listing all the possible answers to the question that you think there are,
Look,
and then
there are
trying
things-
to go through a process of elimination.
Felix, you know much better that in the
You're
real
making-
world.
you're making
no.
logical mistakes
No.
at some point in
I'll
those
tell you.
arguments.
Point.
Can I reword what he's saying in a different way?
Something in DNA which is intelligence.
Whether
there must be something
there was
intelligent
always
that
something,
produces that
or there was
intelligence.
nothing to begin with,
This
there's
is
only
the
two
whole thing.
possibilities.
And using,
Do you agree with
Can
that?
there be a
on the
third?
minimum? Could there be a third?
When you see something,
No, I think there could be a third.
Like-
I can't tell you.
Okay, that's fine, that's fine.
I can't
We
tell
can
you what. I
end
can't
on
tell you what. I can't tell you what that third option is.
We can pick up.
These are very abstract concepts to think about, and I think to say there are these two possibilities and we've got it right and that's it. I think that's
frankly,
I don't think it's possible to have a third
I think that's.
You can think about it.
I could.
But logically, it's impossible to have another third alternative. And let me
Well,
just brief.
that's assuming you understand the logic of how the universe operates.
I think one
which
can.
I think again is a
One
bit.
can
It's a
think
bit
of other possibilities,
a big
but
claim
those
to make.
possibilities will not be coherent or consistent with this reality. Other possibilities like injustices. We can imagine different concepts or different possibilities always, but to scrutinize which possibilities are really consistent with the with the things we are observing and which are consistent with itself also. So now then
Some things, do you know, are binary. They're not anything other than
Maybe
binary.
we can pick up-
So, for example, either God exists or God doesn't exist. It's a binary question. It cannot be a third possible alternative in between.
Are they called red ones, not red?
Yeah, it's either God exists or God doesn't exist. If you think there's a third alternative, I would like to hear it, because I can ask philosophers and mathematicians, what is your third alternative? Because you need to have a meaningful alternative. If the alternative is not meaningful, then there's nothing to discuss.
Okay.
for
that particular question, I don't have a third alternative.
Yeah, good. So at least we know that certain things can be binary.
But you know that I would argue that God doesn't exist.
No, what I'm saying is, at least we know now, from what you've seen
Well,
so
you don't
far,
know-
there are
no.
certain things which are binary.
You
pick up this conversation.
You don't
Yeah, we can
you don't
continue.
know that to be the
Okay.
case. Just because I don't.
Felix,
just because I
do
don't.
you-
just
do you come
because-
here often?
Just because I don't have a third option.
No problem.
Does not mean that there isn't.
No
isn't
problem. Felix, do you
tomorrow.
come here often?
yes, he can.
Yeah. So why don't you, because you've spoken before, is it okay if we continue the discussion later, because they're all waiting for us and going? It's a pleasure speaking to you.
Yeah.
Okay.
That's good. Yeah.
Take care.
Thank you.
You take care.
See you later.
We can give it to people.